All right, let's get started. What's going on? So we're going to jump right in and we're going to open up our DAW. Today we're going to be using Studio One. It's a really good production software. I highly recommend it. It's made by PreSonus. So we're going to be loading things up here, and what you're going to notice is we're going to be working our way through the DAW. We're going to be working with the fundamentals and pretty much just getting to know the DAW today. And I think that's a valuable skill to have, especially when working with audio equipment and recording, production, etc. So you can see here we have our DAW. I'll full screen this. We're working in Studio One today. As you can see, I have my audio interface connected. Now, if you don't have an audio interface connected, you're going to be using the default native interface that comes with your computer, whether it's Mac, PC, and generally these settings right here you're going to be able to adjust, but it's also all dependent on what you're working with the audio interface in the DAW, and because of that, those settings are crucial, especially later on when you're working with bigger sessions or you're working with different types of instruments, whether you're producing, mixing, or you're mastering. For this particular class, what we're going to do is we're going to leave the settings at default, which is 44.1 kilohertz and 512 samples. We'll just leave that there for now. Later on, we'll dive into that a little more and we'll really be able to focus on different settings, and I'll go over what settings are more useful for a particular situation. So what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to create a new song, a new session. If you're using other DAWs such as Pro Tools, Logic, Ableton, or Fruity Loop Studios, FL Studios, generally the formats of the DAWs, or the Digital Audio Workstation, DAW stands for Digital Audio Workstation, are the same. So whether you're going to be doing a new song, a new groove, a new template, a new session, generally they're all the same. So that's kind of good across the board, because if you're working in a different DAW, you can still follow along and get the general basis of what we're going to be doing here. So we're going to go ahead and open up a new song, and for this particular piece we're just going to make an empty song. We don't want to do anything crazy, but you do have other choices depending on what you're working on, whether you're going to be working with a band, house, techno, instruments, maybe doing an arrangement of various instruments and tracks. Maybe you're just working on piano ballads. So that's pretty cool that you have all these cool templates that have been pre-set for you in case, or if you're going to go by different kinds of interfaces, you can even create your own in this tab. So for now, we're just going to go with an empty song. We have our settings set to default. We're not going to mess with those. And we're just going to call this session Getting to Know Your DAW. And we're going to go ahead and save this. And I just want to change where it's going to be saved. So you're going to go ahead, once you create the title, create the name for your DAW, and we're going to jump right in, hit OK, and voila. We're in the session. We're looking at the track field, we're looking at the session view, and we're ready to start learning a little bit about our DAW. So what we're looking at here right off the jump, or right from the start, as you can see, this is going to be our session window. This is our mix window. This is where, when we record audio, when we record instruments, whether they're live instruments or MIDI instruments, audio instruments, you're going to have those session files or the wave files. That's where you're going to see each individual track, and you're going to be able to see the layers. You're going to be able to make edits and slices, cut certain things, whether you're just doing something simple, maybe for social media, or you're doing YouTube videos and you want to learn how to really like start slicing up your audio. This is the way to do it. So we're going to want to familiarize ourselves with this session window. We're going to notice on the top we have what's called our transport bar. This is our transport bar here, and our transport bar is very important because it has all the settings or all the features that we're going to be using to make edits, to make slices, whether we need to raise or lower tracks, whether we need to delete or undo, stretch audio. There's so many features and edits that we can make while working with the transport window. If we look on the bottom, on the opposite end, here, looking vertical, up and down, we see our other transport window, which has everything from our session information to time. Where do we sit with time, whether it's we're working with minutes and seconds or we're working with bars and beats, just like Fruity Loops, just like Pro Tools. It has our control pane so we can start, stop, play, record. All those features are here at the bottom. Moving to the right, if you're looking here at our session window, you will see that we're working in 4/4 time because we set those parameters. You will see our tempo is set at 120 BPMs or beats per minute, and you will also be able to see any incoming audio or outgoing audio with the meters here to the right. Going back just to make sure you understand that you familiarize yourselves with the key components at the bottom of the transport window. Generally with all software you can just hover over them. Pro Tools is a little different, but you can hover over them and it will give you a little display, a little bubble of what you're working with. So for example, we know this is the stop button, so it's telling us, you know, this is our stop button. It even gives us a shortcut on the number pad. So if you're one of those tech savvy people and you like to jump right to the number pad, you can do that as well. Forward, fast forward, rewind, loop, which is really important, especially when you're working with beats or you're working with certain sections of audio that you're trying to hone in on. You want to make sure to do that as well. And moving forward, to our right, we have what's called our selection window. And this selection window, this is our home window, but we're able to jump in on this window and we're able to see the different types of features that are available to us, that are offered to us in Studio One. So if we want to work with instruments, we have our instruments. If we want to work with effects, we have our effects. If your software came with loops or samples, or you have your own loops and samples, that would be the place to go ahead and dig them up. You can individually go and look for files. So if you're trying to import audio or input, you know, you have like the perfect vocal or the perfect guitar that somebody sent to you over the email, that would be the place to go ahead and do that. Nowadays, there's other features that are available with most DAWs as they get more advanced, working with things like the cloud. Pro Tools does it, Studio One does it, Ableton also does it. You're able to save your work to the cloud, to your account, and I know with Pro Tools you are able to share your session with other people and simultaneously you can work on it together. Other features you might want to familiarize yourself with while you're working with the DAW. So again, at the top, you can actually go and individually start looking for your different things, your different effects, your loops. When you have loops, I do have loops. I don't have loops set to this current session, but I will show you how to do so. Files, you could start digging into your hard drive and finding your certain samples, and what you want to import to your session. The cloud, again, you have features whether you could go into your account and you can start using those features that are given to you. Particularly for PreSonus, you're using PreSonus Exchange as well as PreSonus Sphere. And you can even directly upload your work right to SoundCloud. Pretty cool features when you're talking about where we've come from in the digital audio world and how things used to be in the analog world, where, you know, going from microphone tape to reel, and then having to bounce things down numerous times just to have a physical copy of that tape. If you remember those big round analog tapes, those are things of the past. Anyway, so again, you want to familiarize yourself with the DAW. You want to take the time to kind of look over the window. You want to look over your different parameters, your different controls. Again, you can hover over them and it usually tells you what you're working with. So if you're working with your paint tool, you're working with your mute tool, you want to bend audio, fix audio, manipulate the audio, this is the place to do it. The tools, such as the ones on the top here and the ones on the bottom, are always going to be in different places in the DAW. I know Pro Tools, they sit on top. Fruity Loops, they also sit on top. Ableton, they're on top and on the right hand side of your pane, and you can individually bring them up in your tracks, which we will also do here. So let's get started. So first, what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to create a track, because whether you're recording audio for social media, if you're going to be doing broadcasting stuff and you're going to be speaking into a microphone, you're going to want to record that into a track. If you're going to be working with instruments, guitars, bass, you're going to want to record that into tracks. If you're going to be working with drums, those generally have numerous tracks for the complete set: bass, kick, snare, hi-hats, overheads. You're going to want to know how to create a track. You're going to want to know how to configure your track. So let's go into that. So we're going to go into track. You see track here. And we're going to want to add a track. In Mac, if you have a Mac or you have a PC, it's Control-T or Command-T. We're just going to click it for the sake of the example. And it's going to ask us to input some data, such as what do we want to call the track, what type of track is it, whether it's going to be audio, instrument, an automation track, which is something like an aux send. It's what's referred to in the audio industry as an aux send, sending signal out and receiving signal in. A folder, which is something new. It's going to house multiple tracks. If you're working with drums, you might want to put that all into a folder, because it'll keep everything clean in your window and easier to navigate when it comes time to use your folder. So we're going to go ahead and create an audio track, and we're just going to leave it at track 1. You can even change the color of your tracks. There's the different colors you can choose. I have mine set to auto color. The format is either going to be mono or stereo. And generally with the format, if you're doing vocals or you're doing instruments, you have to decide before you record whether it's going to be mono or stereo. You can go from stereo to mono, but you cannot go from mono to stereo. That's something to keep in mind. We're going to keep all these settings as they are, and we're going to go ahead and click OK. And now you see we have our first track created here at the top of the screen. And looking to the left-hand side of the screen, this is going to be where all our tracks, all our folders, instruments, whether they're MIDI or you're using other tracks or aux sends as the automation tracks, that's where they're all going to be housed. And as you can see, each track is almost highlighted. It has a small highlight, and you can follow it with it's opaque, and you can follow it, and that's where that particular track will be housed. So familiarizing ourselves with the track, we have its own set of controls and transports. we're going to want to get to know what those mean. We have mute, we have solo, record, and we can monitor. We'll get into monitoring later. But basically, the three that we need to be concerned with right now are mute, solo, and record. And mute, obviously, it goes without saying, if you don't want to hear that track in a particular session, or you want to remove the sound, you can mute it without affecting the audio of the track. If you want to go ahead and solo the track, soloing will play just this particular track over all the other tracks that you have, thus giving you the ability to zone in on a certain instrument, on a certain vocal, and you can make edits and arrangements, changes within the track that way. It will allow you to use your ears, which a lot of this, especially in the audio world, in the audio engineering field, you're working with your ears pretty much all the time. Generally, you're using things like meters and other kinds of visual cues to get a representation of what you're seeing or what you're listening to. But you mostly, 9 times out of 10, you want to rely on your ears. So moving forward, we have our track. It's called, each track will be numbered. And you can look at the bottom. Working in the drop down, you will notice, since I'm working with an interface, you will have a selection of what inputs and outputs you have. Because I'm working with this particular interface, I have inputs 1 and 2 allocated to use per particular track. The good thing is that the more inputs you have, the better it will be if you're using multiple microphones or multiple inputs or multiple instruments that are coming in. But you can generally change them from track to track depending on the situation. For example, if you're going to be recording a vocal and you have it set to input 1, then later on, if you want to do another vocal take, you can also set that input 1. The key component here is that whatever you're recording, that's where the input is going to be used. So if you have input 1 and input 2, you can record those simultaneously. An example of that would be you have a microphone set up on your guitar and you have a microphone set up for your vocals. You'll be able to record both at the same time. However, if you have a vocal mic and you're trying to do a drum mic, for example, like a snare, they would need different inputs because you cannot have one sound going to 2 different places at the same time, not with the same input. It could cause generally a lot of confusion within your process, and it has happened to people, especially in the beginning, but that is definitely one of those tidbits you want to know off the start from the beginning so you can avoid those pitfalls. If you want to change things like your audio interface, audio setup, this would be the button to do so. Again, I have my audio interface already pre-selected. I have all that working for me, and as you can see, the levels are moving, which means that right now this is all capturing the audio from my voice into the software. So when we play it back, we'll be able to hear that on top of that, plus the audio that's being sent out from the software. We'll see that in a moment. We'll go ahead and click cancel here. Okay, or cancel. Stick around. In the next lesson, we're going to discuss how to set up your microphone.